It's 1720, somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. A man is lying in the hold of a ship that smells like rot and bilge water. He hasn't eaten anything solid in 6 days. His gums are bleeding. 3 of his teeth came out this morning. His legs stopped working 2 weeks ago and he has no idea why. The ship's surgeon came down, poked around, mumbled something about bad air, handed him a cup of vinegar, and left. That man will be dead within the week. Here's what people get wrong about pirates. We picture them dying in cannon fights, or drowning in storms, or swinging from a gallows. But the real killer was none of those things. For every pirate who died in combat, somewhere between 5 and 10 died of something far less dramatic: disease, infection, bad water, malnutrition. The ocean wasn't the most dangerous thing out there. Their own bodies were. So how did any of them survive at all? And why did some pirate crews outlast Royal Navy sailors who had the entire British Empire behind them? That's what we're going to find out. The disease that killed more sailors than anything else was scurvy, and if you've never seen what it actually does to a person, the description is hard to believe. It starts quietly, 4 to 6 weeks into a voyage without fresh fruit or vegetables. Fatigue first, then aching joints, then something stranger. Old wounds that healed years ago start to reopen. Bones that broke and mended start to hurt again. The body needs vitamin C to maintain collagen, and without it, the connective tissue holding everything together starts to fail. Gums swell and bleed. Teeth loosen and fall out. Skin bruises for no reason. Legs swell and stop working. A man with advanced scurvy looks like he's decomposing from the inside out. On salt pork and hardtack alone, a crew could go from healthy to dying in about 6 weeks. Freshwater wasn't much safer. Stored in wooden casks below deck, it turned green and fetid within weeks, breeding the bacteria that caused dysentery. Men surrounded by ocean would die of dehydration, losing fluid faster than they could replace it. Then there were the fever latitudes. When pirate routes crossed into the Caribbean or the West African coast, crews from Northern Europe with zero immunity ran into yellow fever and malaria. A ship anchored off West Africa for water or trade could lose half its crew in 2 weeks. Yellow fever moved fast. Fine on Monday, feverish by Wednesday, vomiting black blood and dead by Friday. This wasn't rare. This was baseline life in the golden age of piracy. Every ship of size carried a surgeon, but the word meant something very different in 1720. There was no licensing, no medical school. Most ship surgeons were barber surgeons. Men who'd learned to cut hair and pull teeth and decided that qualified them to amputate limbs, or apprentices who'd mostly just handed instruments to someone else. Medical theory of the time held that illness came from imbalanced bodily humors, that bad coastal air caused fever, and that bloodletting and purging cured almost everything. If you were sick, they cut you open to drain blood, or gave you something to make you vomit. These treatments didn't help. Often they accelerated death. The medicine chest held vinegar, tar, salt, rum, and if you were lucky, a few herbs of dubious value. No antibiotics, nobody knew bacteria existed. No quinine in common use. Nothing a modern doctor would recognize as medicine. Amputation was the standard response to infection, which, given how often wounds got infected, meant amputation happened constantly. It was fast because it had to be. The anesthesia was rum. A man who survived a cannon shot could easily die of the amputation that followed. On paper, pirate ships should have had worse medical care than the Royal Navy. The Navy had supply chains, institutions, hierarchy. In practice, many pirate crews took better care of their wounded than any warship flying a flag, and the reason was democracy. Pirate crews signed written articles before a voyage, essentially constitutions that spelled out compensation for injury. Lose a right arm and you got a payout worth several $100s today, drawn from the plunder. Lose an eye, a different amount. Lose a leg, another. The numbers varied ship to ship, but the principle didn't. Your body had value to the enterprise, and the enterprise paid for damage to it. That created an incentive to keep men alive that simply didn't exist in the Navy, where a dead sailor was just replaced. On a pirate ship, if the surgeon was incompetent, the crew could vote him out. Pressed men in the Royal Navy had no such option. Here's the part that surprised me most researching this. Pirates stumbled onto real, working medicine decades, sometimes a century, before it became official practice. Not because they were scientists, because desperation is a good teacher. The rats came ashore. Pirates careened their ships constantly, beaching them in hidden coves to scrape the hulls and recaulk the planks. It was routine maintenance, nothing more. But ships were infested with rats by the hundreds, and rats carried fleas, and fleas carried disease. When a ship was beached, the rats went ashore and a lot of them didn't come back before relaunch. A freshly careened ship simply had fewer rats, and fewer disease vectors, than a Navy vessel that stayed at sea or sat in port for months. No captain ever said, "We must reduce our flea burden." They careened because the hull needed it. The health benefit was a side effect. But side effects kept people alive. Turtles beat salt pork. Pirates in the Caribbean hunted sea turtles heavily, calorie-dense, easy to keep alive on deck, and killed fresh as needed, with no spoilage and no curing required. Turtle meat carried nutrients that salt pork simply didn't, and crews who ate it regularly tended to hold up better on long voyages. The lime came before the science. The formal proof that citrus prevented scurvy didn't arrive until 1747, when British naval surgeon James Lind ran one of history's first controlled medical trials, and the Navy took another 40 years to act on it. But pirate crews in the Caribbean were already eating limes and citrus well before Lind wrote a word. Some historians point to exactly this kind of trial and error as the likely path. Crews noticed the men who ate fruit stayed healthy, and the men who didn't died. No theory. No understanding of vitamins. Just eat the fruit, don't lose your teeth. Rum wasn't just for fun. Cask water went bad. Alcohol didn't. Mixing rum with water, what sailors called grog, killed off enough of the bacterial growth to make it safe-ish to drink. Get the ratio wrong and you got sick one way or the other, so experienced crews managed it with real precision, even without a word for what they were doing. Even the weevils weren't a total loss. Hardtack was riddled with them. A sailor eating hardtack for 6 weeks ate hundreds of them. Unpleasant as that sounds. But weevils are protein, and some historians have argued the extra protein may have offset nutritional gaps that would otherwise have hit crews even harder. It's a smaller, less certain piece of the puzzle than the citrus story, but it fits the pattern. Whatever kept men alive, they used. Here's the irony in all of this. A crew could survive months at sea, outlasting scurvy through citrus luck, bad water through careful rationing, the fever latitudes through nothing but fortune, and then make port at Nassau or Tortuga or Port Royal. And that's where they die. Caribbean port towns in the early 1700s were disease ecosystems unlike anything on the open ocean. Dense, crowded, poorly sanitized, packed with people from every corner of the world carrying pathogens none of them had immunity to. Yellow fever was endemic even when it wasn't actively spreading at sea. Typhoid moved through the drinking water. Syphilis spread through the brothels every pirate port had in abundance. And the treatment was mercury, arguably worse than the disease itself. Administered as a cream, a vapor, sometimes a drink, it caused salivation and ulceration of the mouth and gums. Doctors actually measured a patient's progress by how much they were drooling, believing the disease was being purged through saliva. It would be another century before anyone realized the mercury itself was doing the killing. Crews that had stayed remarkably healthy for months at sea could lose men within 2 weeks of stepping onto dry land. Ships would relaunch with a fraction of their original crew, pressing new men from the docks to fill the gaps. New men who brought their own diseases aboard, starting the cycle over again. These men had no germ theory, no understanding of vitamins, no effective medicine for the diseases most likely to kill them, and surgeons who were, at best, occasionally useful for trauma and not much else. And yet some of them lived for decades at sea. Some crews stayed healthier across brutal voyages than Royal Navy ships with the full institutional weight of the empire behind them. They did it with accumulated folk knowledge passed crew to crew, with a democratic system that gave an injured man real financial worth, and with sheer observational stubbornness. Eat the lime. Drink the grog. Scrape the hull. Stay off the docks as long as you can. They didn't have science, but they had consequences, and consequences taught them things official medicine wouldn't catch up to for another 100 years. The line between a pirate who lived to spend his plunder and one who died in the ship's hold was often just a lime, and a little luck. If this is the kind of history you want more of, subscribe. I dig into the real mechanics of how people actually lived, fought, and died in the worlds we romanticize from a safe distance. See you in the next one.